My name is Ethan. I'm 31 years old, and until recently I thought Paris was just another city on the long list of places I had traveled for work. I came here for a technology conference, expecting nothing more than a routine schedule. Meetings, presentations, polite conversations, and evenings spent answering emails in a quiet hotel room. But the moment I stepped out of the taxi near the Louvre, I felt something different about this place. The air itself seemed alive. It carried the faint scent of freshly baked bread and roasted chestnuts from the vendors on the street. The narrow cobblestone alleys wound around me like secrets waiting to be discovered. There was a rhythm to the city, footsteps echoing against stone walls, the distant hum of laughter spilling from cafes, the faint notes of an accordion drifting somewhere from Montmartre. My hotel was small, tucked away on a side street, only a few minutes' walk from the Grand Museum. The sign above the entrance was modest, its light flickering like a heartbeat in the evening fog. When I entered, I was greeted by the warm smell of waxed wood and a receptionist with a tired but kind smile. The place felt more like an old home than a hotel. That first night, after unpacking, I didn't go straight to bed. Instead, I wandered through the streets, guided by nothing but curiosity. Rain had just fallen, and the city glowed as if the pavements were polished mirrors reflecting the golden streetlights. Couples walked close together under umbrellas, their whispers blending with the rain-soaked silence. Every detail seemed amplified. The creak of bicycles, the soft clinking of glasses in a bar, the rustle of leaves in a hidden courtyard. I realized, standing there with my coat pulled tightly around me, that Paris wasn't just another city on my work schedule. It had a pulse, a presence, something that seemed to reach for me, calling me into its story. At that moment, I had no idea that this city and one accidental meeting in a cafe would change everything I thought I knew about love. The next morning, I woke to the sound of church bells echoing faintly across the city. The light in Paris was different, softer, warmer, as if the sun had chosen to rise more gently here. I pushed open the window of my hotel room, and the world outside unfolded like a painting. Narrow streets stretched out below, alive with the clatter of bicycles, the scent of croissants baking in the boulangerie across the street, and the laughter of school children running late for class. The hotel itself was small, almost hidden, yet it had a charm that grew on me instantly. The staircase creaked with every step, the walls were lined with framed sketches of the Seine, and the lobby smelled faintly of lavender. There was something intimate about it, as if time moved slower within its walls. Even the old brass key they gave me, heavy and worn from decades of use, seemed to whisper stories of past travelers who had once stayed there. I spent the morning walking toward the Louvre. The streets were still damp from the rain the night before, and each step echoed softly against the cobblestones. Cafes were just beginning to open, their chairs being arranged neatly outside, while waiters in white aprons swept away traces of the night. A street artist was already at work on the corner, sketching the outline of Notre Dame on a scrap of paper with rapid strokes. His beret tilted at an angle that made him look as though he belonged to another century. As I wandered, I couldn't shake the feeling that Paris was speaking to me in small, subtle ways. Every corner revealed something unexpected. A flower shop overflowing with colors, a bookstore with handwritten notes pinned to the shelves, an old man playing violin at the entrance of a metro station. The city didn't rush. It invited you to slow down, to notice, to breathe. By the time I returned to my hotel in the late afternoon, the world outside had shifted again. Golden light poured down the streets, turning the damp stones into rivers of fire. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching how even the most ordinary things, a bicycle leaning against a wall, a child licking an ice cream, a woman carrying fresh baguettes, seemed extraordinary here. I knew my conference schedule was waiting for me, but in that moment, I felt something pulling me elsewhere. It wasn't the museums, the architecture, or even the grandeur of the city. It was a quieter, more personal feeling, as though something or someone was waiting for me just around the corner. And I didn't know it yet, but I would find that someone sooner than I could imagine. By the third evening in Paris, The city had already begun to weave itself around me like a quiet spell. I had finished a long day at the conference, full of polite handshakes, stiff smiles, and endless presentations. My mind felt heavy with numbers, projections, and meaningless corporate talk. All I wanted was to escape into the streets again, to let Paris clear my thoughts the way only it could. So I walked. The sky was low and gray that evening, the kind of sky that warns of rain but refuses to break until you've wandered too far from shelter. The lamps along the narrow streets flickered on earlier than usual, casting golden halos over the slick pavement. Somewhere nearby, a baker was closing up shop, and the smell of warm bread lingered in the air like an invitation. I turned down a quieter alley, away from the bustle of the main roads, and that's when the rain began. Not a storm, but a fine, steady drizzle that clung to my coat and darkened the cobblestones. I pulled my collar up and searched for cover. That's when I noticed it. A small café tucked between a bookstore and a boutique, its windows glowing with warm light, as though the night outside didn't exist at all. I pushed the door open, and a bell above chimed softly. The place was small, intimate, filled with the rich scent of roasted coffee beans. A handful of people sat scattered at tables, most of them alone, students bent over notebooks, an elderly man reading the newspaper, a couple whispering to each other by the window. The air was warm, buzzing softly with the hiss of the espresso machine. I found a small table near the back and ordered an espresso. When it arrived, steaming and dark, I leaned back in my chair, letting the noise of the outside world fade away. For a moment, I thought the evening would be uneventful. Just me, my coffee, and the comforting hum of Paris beyond the rain. But then, everything changed. The door opened again, and a woman stepped inside. The rain glistened on her hair, and she shook off her umbrella with a graceful flick before glancing around the cafe. The place was nearly full now. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for a seat. For a second, I thought she would walk past me. But instead, without hesitation, she walked straight toward my table and sat down, as if it had always been meant for her. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, I simply smiled, and she smiled back. For a brief moment, time hesitated. She sat down across from me with such ease, as though this table had been waiting for her all along. No polite hesitation, no apology for intruding, just a quiet confidence that somehow felt natural. Her hair was still damp from the rain, strands of it curling softly against her cheeks. She brushed them aside with delicate fingers and set her umbrella against the wall. I noticed the faintest perfume, something floral with a hint of spice, and suddenly the whole cafe smelled different, warmer. "Is this seat taken?" she finally asked, her voice carrying a musical lilt, not hurried, not shy, just calm, as though the question were more of a formality. I shook my head and smiled. "Not at all. Please." Her eyes caught mine then, and I felt something stir inside me, something I couldn't quite name. They were dark, deep, like melted chocolate, but alive with a spark that made me forget the words I planned to say. She ordered a cappuccino, her French accent slipping gently through her English, and when the waiter left, she turned back to me with an easy smile. "It's so crowded tonight. I suppose everyone had the same idea, hiding from the rain." "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt, though I can't say I mind. She tilted her head, amused, as if she'd caught the undertone in my words. For a moment, silence lingered between us, not awkward but alive, like a pause in music before the next note begins. Then, as if on cue, conversation found us. It began with something small, the coffee. She told me she adored the bitterness of espresso, but ordered cappuccino when she wanted comfort. I admitted I'd never learned to love sugar in mine. From coffee, we drifted to books. She spoke of her love for novels that painted entire worlds, and I confessed that travel was my way of finding stories in real life. Then, somehow, we were already talking about journeys, about the strange in-between spaces of airports, about childhood memories of discovering new cities, about the thrill of being lost somewhere unfamiliar. With every sentence, the cafe seemed to shrink around us. The sound of the espresso machine, The murmur of other conversations, the patter of rain against the windows, all of it faded into the background. It was just her and me, and the sense that Paris itself had pressed pause, giving us this stolen moment. At one point, our hands brushed when she reached for her cup. A tiny, fleeting touch, but it jolted through me like static. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. Instead, she smiled. Not the polite smile one gives a stranger, but a real one, small and knowing, as if we both felt something shift. That was when I understood. This wasn't just a random encounter. Something was happening here quietly, delicately, but undeniably. And I wasn't sure I wanted the night to end. Minutes stretched into something unmeasurable. What began as casual talk about coffee and books deepened with surprising ease, as though we were two threads being woven into the same fabric. She told me about her travels, summers in Italy, where the streets smelled of basil and the air shimmered with heat, winters in Prague, where the snow muffled the world into silence. Her words painted landscapes I could almost see, and when she spoke, her hands moved softly, sketching pictures in the air as if the stories themselves were alive. I shared pieces of my own life. Not just the polished, professional version I carried to conferences, but the hidden parts, the sleepless nights, the restless need to keep moving, the loneliness that sometimes lingered even in the most beautiful places. And somehow, she listened without judgment, her eyes steady, her expression open. We laughed about little things, too. About the strange way airports seem to exist outside of time. About childhood dreams, hers of becoming a painter, mine of playing the piano in smoky jazz bars. The laughter felt effortless, like we'd known each other longer than a single hour. The world beyond the cafe melted away. I didn't notice when the rain stopped, or when the couple by the window left, or when the waiter quietly refilled our cups. Paris outside could have been on pause, the city waiting patiently while two strangers discovered each other across a small wooden table. Every time she leaned forward to speak, I found myself leaning in too, closing the space between us. Her eyes caught the warm light, glowing like embers. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger absent-mindedly, and the simple motion held me captive. At one point, there was silence, not awkward, not searching, but full. Full of everything unspoken, of everything understood without words. Our gazes lingered, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the cafe wasn't just a cafe. It was a universe, and we were the only ones in it. I realized then that I had never felt this kind of connection before. Not the hurried passion of fleeting encounters, not the careful companionship of polite relationships. This was something else, something quieter, deeper, something that felt both impossible and inevitable at once. And though I didn't dare to say it out loud, I knew this was the beginning of a story I would never forget. The longer we sat together, the more I realized this was not just conversation. It was an energy, a quiet current flowing between us. Every word, every smile, every pause seemed charged with something more. I watched the way she held her cup, fingers wrapped lightly around the porcelain as if it were an anchor. The way her lips curved when she laughed, the way she tilted her head when she listened. Each detail etched itself into my memory with startling clarity. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. It was that everything about her presence felt alive, magnetic, impossible to ignore. When she leaned closer to hear me over the low hum of the cafe, her shoulder brushed mine. It was such a small touch, barely there, but I felt it like a spark. I didn't move away. Neither did she. Instead, her hand lingered on the table, fingers just close enough that if I shifted slightly, they might touch mine. I almost did, but then she tucked a loose curl of hair behind her ear, her eyes flickering down with a quiet smile, and I wondered if she had noticed the same tension. The cafe around us blurred into background noise. The hiss of steam, the clinking of cups, the muffled sound of rain easing outside. No one else seemed to notice the space we had created, this invisible circle where only she and I existed. It was subtle, invisible, but undeniable. At one point, I told her a story about getting lost in Lisbon, about wandering narrow streets until I stumbled upon a hidden fado bar. She laughed, not politely, not out of obligation, but with a sound so genuine it warmed the entire room. Her laughter was not just heard. It was felt vibrating through me, settling into my chest like something I had been missing without realizing it. And then came the moment I couldn't ignore. Our hands brushed again, not by accident this time. I felt her fingers linger, the barest pressure, enough to say without words, "I feel it too." My heart pounded, steady but strong, as though reminding me, this is real. This is happening. I realized I didn't want the evening to end, didn't want to return to the quiet anonymity of my hotel room. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow or the conference or the life waiting for me back home. I was only thinking about her, this stranger who already didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Paris had given me a gift I hadn't expected, a connection that defied logic. Chemistry so delicate it could be ignored, but so powerful it refused to be. And as we sat there, our words slowing, our silences deepening, I understood that we were both waiting for the same thing, the moment when the night would take us outside, together. Eventually, the cafe began to empty. The old man with the newspaper folded it neatly and left. The students gathered their notebooks. The couple by the window disappeared into the night. Yet we remained. Neither of us seemed willing to break the spell, though it was clear the evening was moving forward, urging us toward the next chapter. At last, she set her cup down gently, her fingertips tracing the rim before she looked at me. "Shall we?" she asked softly, almost as though she was inviting me into something more than just the rain-soaked streets outside. We stepped out together. The door closed behind us with a soft chime, and the city greeted us with the delicate hush of rain still falling, lighter now, almost playful. The pavement glistened, and the streetlights turned the droplets into tiny diamonds scattered across the ground. She opened her umbrella, and without a word, tilted it so there was room for both of us. We walked close, shoulders brushing. The world narrowed to the sound of raindrops pattering above us, and the faint perfume of her hair drifting toward me. Every step felt like a secret we were sharing. At one point, she stopped in front of a small boutique, its awning offering shelter. We stood there for a moment, neither rushing to move on. The glow of the shop's window lit her face, soft and golden, her eyes reflecting the light as if they held their own secret fire. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence between us was alive, charged, saying everything words could not. I became acutely aware of the closeness, of her breath, of the warmth radiating from her body, of the delicate tension humming in the air. My hand hovered near hers, tempted, almost drawn as though by gravity. She glanced at me then, her lips curved in the faintest smile, and the world seemed to hold its breath. We moved again, wandering through the narrow lanes of Montmartre. The city around us was quieter now, softened by the rain. We passed glowing windows filled with books, bakeries closing for the night, and walls covered in ivy glistening like emeralds. She laughed when a sudden breeze tugged at her umbrella, and the sound filled the street like music. I found myself laughing too, though I hadn't felt that kind of easy joy in a long time. It wasn't forced, it wasn't polite. It was real. It was hers. And as we walked side by side, hand brushing hand in those delicate, almost accidental touches, I realized I didn't want the night to end. Paris was no longer just a city. It had become a stage for something unfolding between us, something fragile, yet already unforgettable. Montmartre at night was unlike any place I had ever seen. The rain had slowed to a delicate mist clinging to the cobblestones, wrapping the hilltop streets in a veil of quiet magic. Every corner we turned revealed another scene that felt painted, not real. An artist packing up his easel beneath a flickering lamp, a cat slinking silently across a low wall, a cafe terrace deserted but still glowing with amber light. We walked slowly, not because we were tired, but because neither of us wanted to rush. Our pace matched the city's rhythm, unhurried, deliberate, savoring every step. Sometimes we spoke, Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we let silence fill the space between us. Yet that silence was never empty. It was full, alive, rich with a sense of closeness I couldn't explain. She told me about her childhood, about afternoons spent in her grandmother's kitchen where the air always smelled of cinnamon and oranges. I told her about summers by the sea, about the sound of waves breaking against the shore and the way salt clung to my skin. Each story was simple, ordinary, but somehow they felt sacred as we shared them. The streets climbed upward, narrow and winding. We passed little shops with painted shutters, their windows displaying postcards and tiny souvenirs. At one, she stopped to admire a row of old books arranged like treasures in a wooden crate. She lifted one, brushing dust from its cover with reverence, and her eyes lit up in a way that made me wish I could give her a library full of such discoveries. As we continued, I noticed how often our hands brushed. At first, it was chance, a step too close, a turn in the street, but then it became intentional, playful, like a secret game. Once, she let her hand linger, fingers grazing mine before pulling away with a mischievous smile. My heart raced at the touch, at the unspoken invitation hidden inside it. The city around us was quiet, but it felt alive. The lamps cast long golden shadows, making the stones beneath our feet shimmer like wet glass. From a distance, music drifted, faint notes of an accordion, soft and mournful, like Paris itself was serenading us. At one point, we stopped near a small square where ivy climbed the walls and flowers spilled from window boxes even in the night. She turned to me then, her hair catching the lamplight, her eyes reflecting a softness that pulled me closer without a word. "Doesn't this feel like a dream?" she whispered. I nodded, but the truth was heavier in my chest. No dream had ever felt this real. And as we stood there, the mist curling around us like smoke, I realized something undeniable. This night wasn't just a passing moment. It was becoming part of me, as unforgettable as breath itself. The streets of Montmartre eventually led us downward, winding like ribbons until we reached the river. The Seine shimmered under the lamplight, its surface restless, carrying reflections of bridges and buildings that looked almost dreamlike in the night haze. Paris seemed quieter here, as if the entire city was leaning closer to listen to what was about to unfold. We crossed a small bridge, not one of the grand ones crowded with tourists, but a modest arch of stone, worn smooth by time. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving behind a freshness in the air, a fragrance of wet stone and blooming flowers carried from hidden gardens nearby. We paused in the middle of the bridge. The water flowed beneath us, dark and infinite, whispering secrets only the river knew. The lamps cast a golden glow that framed her face, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. She leaned against the railing, her eyes drifting over the water. Then, softly, as if sharing something fragile, she whispered, "This place feels like a fairy tale." The words hung in the air between us, tender and delicate, and I couldn't help but agree. "It does," I murmured, my voice lower than I expected, almost reverent. She turned then, her gaze meeting mine. For a heartbeat, we said nothing. It wasn't necessary. Her eyes spoke enough. A depth, a recognition, a spark that pulled me toward her without resistance. My hand found hers. At first, it was the lightest of touches, fingers brushing, testing like the moment before a leap. But then her fingers curled around mine, warm and certain, and the connection sent my heart racing so fast I thought she might hear it.